This week on HomeKit News, the Aqara Magic Switch S1E with HomeKit. So today I'll be looking at the Aqara Magic Switch S1E for the most part, but I'll also be going over the basic features of the Aqara MagicPad S1 and the Aqara Scene Panel S1. Anyway, starting with the Aqara Magic Switch S1E, here are some basic specs, so pause the video if required. The S1E doesn't use Zigbee, instead opting for Wi-Fi, which means it can connect directly to HomeKit, although you still want to use the Aqara app for a lot of additional features. Let's have a look at what's in the box now, and we have the display panel itself, which measures 86 by 86 millimeters, which is a standard size for China and Europe, although this won't fit EU switch boxes unfortunately. There's a small manual in Chinese, but you'll find no HomeKit code, more on that later. And there are a pair of standard screws to affix it to a switch box, and you also get 4 tiny black screws, the use of which I'll go into later in the video. I've got all 3 switches mentioned at the start laid out here, which are the Scene Panel S1, the MagicPad S1, and of course the Magic Switch S1E. Now the first thing to note is that the Scene Panel S1 is essentially a wired switch, so you have live and neutral wire sockets plus load wire sockets for each of the 3 switches. The S1E is almost exactly the same in this respect, with the same layout for 3 switches and a requirement for a neutral wire. The MagicPad, on the other hand, isn't actually a switch but still requires live and neutral wires. It's a Zigbee hub with extra features, and you also get an Ethernet port for connectivity, although it can use Wi-Fi in either band. Adding the S1E to HomeKit is via the display itself. So once it's powered up, you first get a QR code for Android users, but you also get access to the HomeKit code. I won't go through the installation as it's pretty standard for any Aqara Wi-Fi HomeKit device. Let's now have a look at the features, starting with the display, which has a dimmed screensaver by default. Tap it to wake the display and the first of up to 6 screens appear, all of which can be accessed by swiping left or right. This particular screen is made up of 2 sections. The top section is a service or accessory area, with services displaying local weather, date and a clock, or detailed control on a specific Aqara device. The bottom section in this case is for the 3 wired switches, which can be toggled on or off as expected. The next screen has 6 tiles relating to the 6 wireless buttons all exposed to HomeKit, and at the bottom is a simple device button for on-off control. Above is a simple clock with date. Onto a third screen now, and I've got 3 buttons along the bottom to trigger Aqara scenes, whilst the top features a clock again with another simple device button on the left hand side, in this case a light strip. If you swipe down from the top you get access to further settings, although they're all in Chinese with no English option. As you can see from this first screen again, local weather is displayed, although it may or may not work in other countries, whilst along the bottom are buttons for the wired switches, which can be set with specific names and icons of your choosing. If we now go into the Aqara app and the settings for the S1E, you can see the screen layouts I've already set up and how they correlate to the separate screens displayed on the device. If I now just go back to the first screen, I can change the service from weather to a clock, although to be fair the weather service also displays the time anyway. If I change this top section from a service to an accessory, I can then choose from most of the Aqara devices I have. So if I select the E1 blinds for example, I then get a new display which gives me basic controls for those blinds: open, close and pause in this case. If I choose another accessory for example like the Aqara L1 350 ceiling lamp, I can then turn the light on or off via the display, adjust the brightness and also adjust the colour temperature. One interesting feature is that whilst the 3 switches can replace standard light switches, you can change them to intelligent load, which allows them to control smart lighting when they're connected to the switch in question. So essentially it's sort of a smart wired switch controlling a smart light. In the app you can change the icon and name for each switch to something more relevant, and you can also do this with the 6 wireless buttons. If I go to the themes section, there's lots of different themes to choose from. So in this case, I'll select Summer Sea, and it implements the changes on the device quite quickly. The layouts for each screen you've created stay the same, it's just the theme or skin that changes essentially. I'll now just add another screen and choose a specific layout, and once added you can see the new layout is displayed and accessible, although in this case it's empty until I add services or accessories to it. If I add my Aqara strip, you then quickly see the top section display control of the strip, which is limited to power, brightness and 4 preset colours. If I want to add a scene or device to the buttons at the bottom, what's cool is that I can even set up switches other than the ones built into the S1E, which also includes the switches on the Scene Panel S1 for example, or even other Aqara wired smart switches like the H1 or H1M series. When it comes to assigning a smart light to one of these buttons, however, you only get control over the power, so no colour or brightness control. If we go to the screen with the 6 wireless buttons, these are all exposed to HomeKit as I already mentioned, although they're limited to single press, so you can't double press or long press them. These buttons are also exposed to Aqara, so even devices like the pet feeder can be controlled from the S1E. If we quickly dive into the Home app, you can see the toggle controls for the 3 wired switches. One thing to note is that if you ungroup these 3 switches as single tiles, for some reason the 6 wireless buttons disappear in the Home app, so I think this appears to be a bug. These buttons can trigger scenes, individual devices, or even shortcuts within the Home app. Let's now have a look at the mechanics of these switches. So all of these displays connect to the wired portion of the switch and can be removed like so. And whilst these switches can be fixed into switch boxes with the normal large screws I showed earlier, Aqara actually sells special spacers that help you to line up additional switches. These are what I guess you can call brackets, and they come in formats for 2, 3 or 4 devices. Here's the 4 panel bracket, and as you can see the S1 sits in quite nicely. To keep these in place you then need the 4 small screws I also mentioned at the start of this video. Now let's have a look at the Scene Panel S1, which displays the time, date and local weather, along with sensor readings from the standard Aqara temperature sensor, the TVOC sensor and more. In my case, I also have access to my AC units via the Aqara P3, which allows all manner of control, including a nice temperature wheel that I can dial in. I can also access the 3 wired switches, which can be adjusted to show 1, 2 or 3 switches. I can also control my Aqara roller motor too, the T1C, although the E1 roller shade driver isn't exposed for some reason. I can also access things like my Aqara light strip as well as any other Aqara lights I happen to have connected, with access to colour, colour temperature and brightness parameters. Finally, there's also a separate screen for Aqara scenes if you want quick access to those. And lastly, the MagicPad S1, and once again you get access to the same sensor data, although in this case for every room with sensors, not just the one room with a sensor connected to the MagicPad. You also get access to scenes created in the Aqara app, but without the limit of 6 scenes as per the Scene Panel S1. Unlike the other panels, the MagicPad allows you to stream the live feed from your Aqara cameras, like the G3, which also allows me to pan and tilt directly from the screen. Even the older G2H can also be used with the MagicPad, which is great if you still have some of them in use like I do. As you can see, the MagicPad has access to a variety of Aqara devices, which also includes wired switches, including the switches on the S1 again, but also H1 and H1M switches. I can also fully access my P3 units once again, which once expanded gives me a different user interface to the Scene Panel S1. So these expanded controls also work with lighting products, with sliders for both colour, colour temperature or even brightness, as well as basic on-off controls. So just to recap on the main differences between the 3 display panels. Of the 3, the MagicPad seems to be the most attractive as long as you're happy to control just Aqara devices in the main. But for HomeKit control, the S1E has the edge with the 6 wireless buttons exposed to HomeKit. Finally, onto the pros and cons, and as just mentioned, the buttons being exposed to HomeKit is a major plus for this device, which is something users have long wanted. It seems Aqara is intent on adding more themes, which is great considering we all have different tastes, of course. With up to 6 separate screens, this could be the one device to control almost everything in the room, if not the whole home, and for the price, it really is a bargain when compared to the cost of a standard Aqara smart switch. The next point is not a con as such, as this is designed for Chinese homes really, so as it's designed for square boxes, this isn't going to work in European homes, at least not without some dedicated remodelling and a neutral wire. The only con I can think of, which is personal to me, is due to it using Wi-Fi and not Zigbee. There may be very valid reasons for it using Wi-Fi, but if you plan on controlling other Aqara devices, you'll already have a hub anyway, so I feel it would have been better off using Zigbee. On balance, I'd say the S1 is probably the best all-round switch of the three, although the MagicPad also has a lot of pluses. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comment section, and if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them. Please do subscribe if you haven't already, and in the meantime, stay safe and let's all hope for a brighter 2023. Happy New Year!